Sometimes these regulations and red tape are in place to protect patient privacy. But in this instance, this was all about the impediment of rapid rollout of this testing. I'm reading this to you, and I'm saying this next part, not as honestly, not as political, but I think it's disingenuous the way that this has been omitted from most, and kudos to the Times for reporting on this, but it's really been omitted from a lot of the cable news discussion, because this is one of the things that they have said, this is Trump's fault. Now, what did I just play? The audio that I just played. Trump on it? Yeah, the audio soundbite 28. Go ahead and play that again. Remember what I just read?
Last night, the FDA announced groundbreaking new policies to further increase testing, very substantially so. All states can now authorize tests developed and used within their borders in addition
they couldn't
to
before.
the FDA. So the
How is
states are
that
very
Trump's
much
fault?
involved. They have been
This has
involved
been a
from the beginning.
long-standing regulation. I think it even predates Obama. This has been a long-standing regulation. This is big government. This is what happens with top-down regulation. The reason that the administration was behind is because of these regulations that they are now removing. You want to be prepared for pandemics. There is no entity that is going to be able to anticipate every single thing that needs to be either changed or omitted when something happens as a way to quickly, swiftly react. Because if he would have done this and suspended these regulations before this happened, how, let me ask, how, I don't care how, if you're a partisan on the right or left, be honest, how do you think that this would have been interpreted by media? They lost their minds when he suspended travel specifically to the outbreak, the hot zone in China, and then to all of China. They got mad at him for that, and they said it was too early, and they said it was too, that he was, first they were saying that he didn't do enough, then they said that he was doing too much, and then they were hysterical about it, and now we're here.
Xenophobic.
Yeah. How do you think that they would have attacked him for violating, they would have, pun really not intended, trumped this up to be a crazy accusation about an infringement of patient privacy. You know that. That is how this headline, if he would have done this before, this is how it would have been reported. You know that. So the next time you hear people trying to politicize this and say that the reason that the administration is behind is because they didn't react quickly enough, that wasn't the fault. That wasn't the problem. They were meeting about this in December. That's why they had the task force ready to go right at the beginning of January. It's because of this. You actually had a bloated bureaucracy, a bureaucratic department telling this doctor, this is just one example, by the way. I want to caution you, that's just one example. Telling this doctor, yes, we realize that you're identifying coronavirus and you're doing it quicker than we can, but no, you don't get to do this. Holy blank. This is insane, but this is what big government gets you. And I realize I'm still cautious when I'm citing the CDC. And I realize right now it's all hands on deck, but I want you to still remember that these are big agencies, unappointed people or unelected people, and they have, well, they've spent a lot of time previously working on identity politics and programs to that extent. I could get into that quite heavily and finish the show with that. I'm prepared to do so. I got a whole bunch of data over here for you. But I wanted to share this with you because I feel that's incredibly important. I have it linked up on the site, but I'll do a special thing just with that. But that to me that's significant. And you want to know why people are really hesitant to immediately go all in and believe all of this stuff? And here you have the double insult of the media that's mocking Trump supporters and Republicans and conservatives and libertarians and even skeptical independents, and they're mocking them like Jennifer Rubin did on whatever the hell channel actually still has her and decides to call her as a Republican. I mean, sidebar, what an amazing grift to be able to identify yourself as a Republican while not actually being a Republican. Kudos. Back to the topic. So I'm amazed at and watching the double insult of the media go after the people that it believes to be, I guess, the quote unquote deplorables or whatever, and mock them for not believing in something when they literally built the entire atmosphere that contributes to the disbelief in what they report. I mean, later on in the show, I'm going to sit here and tell you all about how all the charges with regards to this Russia witch hunt were just dismissed. I mean, were we not led to believe that for the past 4 years, this was the be all end all? We got proof, they said. I got proof, said Schiff. I got everything that you would ever want to. Oh, by the way, all the charges are dropped. And notice how they surreptitiously announced this in the middle of all hell breaking loose with a pandemic. And you want us to believe everything that the media reports. And then you mock us when we don't. I mean, you ran with this stuff. A lot of the same journalists that got fat checks from Fusion GPS to run this garbage, this debunked garbage, and divorce the American people from their belief in the free press. The free people in a free press. You can't be a free press without a free people. And you can't be a free press when you're too busy carrying water for partisan politics. Either be an editorialist, go into commentary, but don't call yourself and don't masquerade as some straight no chaser reporter. All of this reporting this whole time, and I made this point so long ago, a free press got mad when a free people would criticize it. Well, then you ain't a free press if you don't think a free people can criticize you. Don't call yourself a free press if you don't like the free people's criticism. Because the free people have every right to hold their free press accountable just as they do the politicians in whom they invest their authority with a vote. Now, all these stories, all this time, year after year after year, day after day after day. Kane, how long did we cover some of this? It got to the point where I didn't even want to turn on the mic to cover this garbage. Yeah. We had meetings about this. I'm like, if I have to report on this garbage one more damn time, I'm going to set something on fire. So now here we are. They dismissed the charges. Now you look at everything that has happened with that story and everything that has been reported in the past several years, and then again ask the question as to why people don't believe what is being reported even during a time of a pandemic. And there's your answer. I'm going to be real with you. I understand that some of y'all are struggling with it, and because we're supposed to be staying inside of our houses for 14 days, I don't know about you, but I love it. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to deal with any BS. I love it. I don't have to deal with the traffic. I don't have to deal with waiting in line. I love it. It's like, this is like introverts. This is your time. So, it's kind of look at it like that, right? There's ways that we can look at this. This is the other way I'm looking at it. Although I did get mad, I'm going to be honest. My kids got in trouble this morning. Because I run a pretty tight ship normally anyway. And I am of the mindset that this is not a snow day. And I've been very hardcore my kids know that when you turn 18, I don't have to indulge this, I'm going to live with you till I'm 30 fantasy that apparently subsists in the minds of some of their friends. I don't do that. I'm like, I'm not legally responsible for you at all when you hit 18. So you either contribute or you pack up. I've always been like that. I am not that parent. Like, I love my kids and I love the fact that, I'm having more time with them. But at some point, it's like I was a parent and we got married very young. So I'm like, we're going to go out and have fun. So, but get out. But when my son left for college, that hit me in ways that I did not expect. And it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to deal with because we're a really close family. We're the family that does the game nights and we're the house that the kids come to. And so it's, sad when they, go off to their separate corners of the earth. So I'm kind of glad that he's here and that everybody's back under the same roof, because I feel like I got a little bit of a reprieve. It's a little bit of a gift that they're all under the same roof. And so, I'm just enjoying that right now. And I'm looking at it, like that. For the moms that have super little kids, and I got friends that have super little kids. Oh my gosh. I understand. You want to rip your hair out. You love your children. Let's not miss anything. You love your children. You love them babies. You love them. But at the same time, you're like, oh my gosh, I get it. At some point, there's too much Dora. I get it, right? Enjoy it though, because as the years go by, the time is going to erase the stress you felt, and it's going to look at it like this way: the passage of time will put an Instagram filter on all of those memories, and you're not going to see the stress. You're not going to see the hurriedness. You're not going to see how you really didn't want to play Go Fish or Old Maid with your kids playing cards, but you did it anyway. And you're not going to remember in your memories how you really wanted to make kids, or you wanted to make cookies with the kids, but ultimately it was just you making cookies because they couldn't do anything right. I mean, look, I get it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the time. I had two friends that have had to cancel weddings. I have other friends that are getting ready to have a baby, and they're very scared right now. I have seen some college freshmen. All of a sudden, their universities are shut down. And one of my son's friends, it doesn't look like their university is going to open this year, so it's pretty much their freshman year's done. And there's a lot of nervousness and freaking out about that. The high school seniors, college seniors. You kind of have your senior year sort of taken from you a little bit. So it's stressful. I think we all do ourselves a disservice, though, by focusing on all of the things that suck, right? Approach it in the way that Jack White approached playing drums with his ex-wife. Woman couldn't play drums to save her life, which was kitschy, and it worked. And so he made himself work within this context. How can I make this the most awesomest ever? This is like a weird analogy, but roll with me. We will bring the tugboat to shore. He played drums with her. I mean, bad, right? Bad. But it was so weird. It worked beautifully. Did it not? Genius. It was really genius. And physically he worked in that context, would not do anything. He forced himself to be so good in a way to kind of overcompensate and go with it that it made it brilliant. Kind of look at your circumstances in that manner. This is how I look at it. It is what it is, and it's not going to change by you getting freaked out about it. You being anxious and being freaked out is not going to make the situation better. It's going to stress you out, and it's going to make you miserable, and it's going to make everyone else around you miserable. So don't do it. You can't change it by feeling that way, so don't do it. Roll with it. It is what it is. For instance, my son wants a blueberry pie for his birthday cake, and he does not want actual cake. He wants a blueberry pie. Now, I always pretty much have everything ready to go for most everything. I just did not have enough blueberries. I had some fresh blueberries because I made some like blueberry pancakes the other day, but not enough to do like a pie. I'm like, oh, okay. Have you tried ordering on Amazon Prime lately? Because I can't even get a delivery time. It's been 2 days now. Yeah. Can't even get a delivery time on Amazon Prime. Found some frozen because my recipe, the best, look, really fresh is the best. And I'm using like leaf lard. I'm doing, everything's good. So I found like one package and I just need one more package. And I'm not freaking out. If worse comes to worse, I'm going to work with my set of circumstances. And I kind of feel vindicated because guess what I found? You all have made fun of me for eating canned cranberry. You know how many emails I've gotten every Thanksgiving from you people asking me why it is that I don't do cranberry relish with fresh cranberry? And you're like, Dana, sitting here talking about your love for that sludge that has the marks of a can around it, and you slicing it up and putting it on a bed of lettuce doesn't make it any fancier? Well, guess what? I found a recipe that I can use that with the little blueberries that I have, and if worse comes to worse, I can make a pie that way. So I feel pretty damn vindicated right now. Thank you. Long live canned cranberry. What? I wonder how our friend Ted Nugent out there on Spirit Wild Ranch in the hills of Texas somewhere in a bunker. I wonder how he's dealing with all of this because he's getting ready to go on tour. Well, at least I don't know how that's going to work anymore. Ted Nugent joins us now on the phone. Uncle Ted, God bless America. Welcome to the show.
You betcha. God bless truth, logic, and common sense. By the way, I hope everybody knows that starting right now, according to the Motor City Madman, that when you lash out at someone, that's a new cultural colloquialism that means truth, logic, and common sense is inevitable. Dana Lash, I love your truth, logic, common sense, we the people celebration, and the Nugent family is with you every time you open that mouth of yours. God bless you, woman.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. How are you all doing? Because are you going on tour still? I was hearing that Live Nation was canceling some dates, and I was wondering what's going on?
Well, I tour every summer in between hunting seasons. It's my job.
Yes.
I think since 1958, I've rock and rolled my ass raw every summer. It's like after the fishing turkey season, after we go fishing and kill turkeys and kill bears, after the spring celebration, which, by the way, I think, to keep things in perspective, I think that my job as Ted Nugent is to bring positive spirit and glowing energy to an otherwise cluster-whacked condition. And all I can say, Dana, is we will get into the gory details, and you're doing a great job. In fact, boy, I have some real heroes out there, from Tucker Carlson to the guys and gals on the Five, and most of the people over at Fox there. Thank God for truth, logic, and common sense. But let's keep it in perspective. I'd like to start out by saying, from the Nugent family, happy springtime.
Yes.
We're doing just fine. We don't scramble to go to the store for toilet paper because we got plenty of that stuff. You know, I'm 71 years clean and sober, and I've never been short of at least 3 months worth of toilet paper. Call me radical. So let's keep things in perspective here. Yes, it is a horrible situation. Real or otherwise, is yet to be determined, quite honestly. We know that the condition's real, and we pray for our fellow Americans and people around the world. But I got to tell you, Dana, alteration in the Nugent lifestyle since COVID-19 erupted,
Hasn't changed.
Zero.
I was going to say,
I have not changed
you live that life.
anything that I do. Yeah, I do. We got unlimited water. When I graduated from high school, I don't know how I managed that, but I did. My instinct as a guy raised in a hunting family, where you understand where your food, clothing, shelter, medicine, tools, and weapons come from. It comes from nature. And so I've always been a pragmatist, and of course that's what guided me to be clean and sober all my life. Maybe I'm the only guy who's been clean and sober for 71 years, so logic doesn't confuse me. But I've always been prepared. I've always lived on property since I could first purchase property back around 1970, where I had water, unlimited fish, unlimited meat and the critters that run around my land, unlimited firepower, just because I love to shoot, but I don't want to just have enough ammo for this afternoon's shoot. I'd like to have enough ammo just in case a modern Alamo erupted. And that's just pragmatism. So I hope that the lesson being learned here is twofold, if I may. Number one, how stupid do you have to be not to be prepared for self-sufficiency and independence for at least a couple months?
Amen.
And if people are offended by that statement, good. Maybe that'll spur you on to not be dependent in the future. And number two, why is this horrible condition erupting? I'll tell you why. I'm just a guitar player, never went to college, too busy learning stuff. And what I learned is that the curse, the self-inflicted curse of apathy, allowed all past administrations in the United States government, follow me on this, Dana, we gave control of our medicine and antibiotics to the genocidal communist Chinese? Are you kidding me? I mean, what are we going to do, hire John Wayne Gacy to be in charge of the Children's Daycare Center? I mean, this is absolute criminal corruption to the worst degree. So the communist genocidal tyrants of China control our basically are the health and life and death of America because they control the antibiotics. The past thank God for Donald Trump. If this isn't divine intervention, I'm going to take Caitlin out to dinner tonight. This is bizarro world. Times 1,000. So I hope people are learning that we have to engage in the sacred experiment in self-government and elect people that have a sense of decency and constitutional authority, not people who will give our medical and life and death conditions over to the Chinese from now on.
Yes.
Hello?
That's a huge point, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it's something like 92% of everything that we need for antibiotics is all in China, all produced, manufactured. Not just that, but acetaminophen, vitamin C, ibuprofen. We have allowed, and that's a national security issue at this point. We've allowed them to completely take over that supply chain, and they've flirted with the idea of cutting us off just in their state newspapers just last week. I think
if anybody's listening, I know you drive this home all the time, and again, that's why we thank you. I bring you love from Shemaine and the whole Nugent family, and quite honestly, my band, my crew, my management, my team, my hunting buddies. We love that you represent the common sense that we sustain ourselves with every day, being independent, being creative, being an entrepreneur, work and earn our own way. Here's a radical one. Earn your own way, live within your means, and save for a rainy day.
Right.
Well, welcome to the worst rainy day I have ever witnessed, maybe that has ever existed this side of the bubonic plague and post 9/11 or Y2K, but this is the worst of the worst. And again, I'll repeat this. This is not taught in schools anywhere in America.
Right.
Earn your own way, which brings self-esteem and confidence and independence and happiness when you earn your own way. Live within your means. Don't buy a bunch of crap you don't need.
Right.
And save for a rainy day. What am I, weird?
No, I think you're right.
Obviously, people who are scrambling for toilet paper didn't save for a rainy day. So, I think there's some hardcore lessons that sometimes it takes a cultural sucker punch to wake goofy people up. So I hope the goofy people are waking up.
I tell you, Uncle Ted, one of the things I did last night was I walked into my pantry, and one whole side of it is I just refer to as that's the prepper part of my pantry. And I have my meal bars, and I have my water filtration, and I have, over the year, have collected some toilet paper. I have not gone to the store and purchased more than I needed for the week. I just, every now and then I'd get a little extra over the, actually it's been over a year. And I walked into that pantry last night, and I just turned on the light, and I stood and really just was in awe of what I had in there and how my husband sometimes would joke with me about hoarding. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm preparing, because now we're not at the store. We're not the people that have to go do that, and we're not taking anything from anybody that needs it. And I felt good, and I went to bed.
Well, that's called independence. We're supposed to declare our independence. And what you looked at, I bet you had a really cute little grin on your face, knowing that some people actually make fun of so-called, independent people, and I suppose you could use the word hoarder, but it's mostly preppers. Who's not prepared? Who goes to the store for a fire extinguisher when the flames erupt? You're supposed to have one. And that's the same with the firearms. You're supposed to have one so that you don't become the same victim of the people who are guaranteed to be victims when you choose to be unarmed and helpless. So there's a huge sucker punch of wake-up pragmatism and utilitarian self-sufficiency going on here, and mostly in this most dramatic form, worth repeating, that we have allowed government criminal goons to control our country, and they gave our life and death determining medical and antibiotic control to the freaks in China. We can't do this anymore. May I repeat, the greatest president in the history of America, America first. He's renegotiating all these horrible anti-American contracts around the globe so that America can benefit. We are energy independent, and we damn well better put it on the fast track to become medical and antibiotic independent.
Yes.
And that's just the author of Wango Tango's presumption. But it's so obvious.
Accurate.
It's ridiculous.
Before we go, because I know that you can really tell this to people. I want explain to people how, because and it's not just the antibiotics that we've given over to. A lot of people in the United States have given in to that instant gratification and cheap product at the expense of cheap labor and getting everything from overseas, from China, etc. Tell everybody the importance of making sure that they're doing their due diligence and buying American. Even if it means a few dollars more, it's worth it to make sure that we are controlling that and keeping that within the states.
Well, first of all, let me emphasize that very important point you're bringing. I think it may be, Dana, is that not the most important point when we want to be America first, America strong, American independence? But I'm currently selling tens of thousands of hats that say "Re-elect that mofo."
I've seen them.
It came as a cute little moment in a hunting camp. And I sit out in the shop and I sign thousands of these hats that you can see at my website or on Facebook. And people want these hats, and some of the people complain that the hats were made in China. Well, I don't order hats. I just sign them. I have people that order and ship. But when they criticize me for having a hat made other than in America, I say, you mean like all the medicines and the life-saving drugs that you give your family that were bought from Chinese people? We have got to get on the fast track to be America first in everything we do. And I know it's not easy because a lot of the goods that we all consume come from foreign countries because past administrations have negotiated on behalf of enriching themselves both monetarily and politically. And now we have... I think Donald Trump is as close to Ted Nugent as you'll ever get in political office. And this guy has to be supported. So we, the people, have got to raise hell with our elected employees more now than ever to support and work with Donald Trump as the president to renegotiate all contracts that benefit American workers, American business, American entrepreneurs, ultimately American consumers, because as we have now attained energy independence, we have to attain American independence from all other countries ASAP. So this is a difficult time we're in with the coronavirus. But it's also a sucker punch. It's like Barack Obama becoming president woke up a lot of conservatives that you can't let people who hate America into the White House anymore.
Right.
So we got our guy there, and I hope that we raise hell with our elected employees to support Donald Trump, President Trump, make sure we reelect that mofo come November, and not let these America haters negotiate where America is not even considered in the negotiations, Democrats.
Amen to that. You can watch him, Spirit of the Wild, tednugent.com. He does have an upcoming best redacted tour ever. That's that I know this summer I want to get out to see Ted Nugent. Always a pleasure to have you on, my patriotic countryman. I appreciate you, appreciate your voice, and thank you for the encouragement and support. And we'll all get through this together. We will. God bless you, my friend. God bless the fam.
God bless the Lash family. You can say hi to Chris and the boys for me, and you take care of yourself. God bless America.
So there are certain people who think that the government exists to provide goods and services at a time like this. And then there are people who believe that this is the time that the government needs to back off and allow the private sector to step in the gap and provide the goods and services that it can do and has done, which is why it's so successful at it, and whereas the federal government cannot do it. This is where I'm really, really confused with Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney, Andrew Yang had already proposed this back when he was running for president. Phil Mattingly had shared I'm going to pull this up, had shared Romney calls for urgent action on additional coronavirus response measures. And among those are, quote, immediately send $1,000 checks to each American adult. Literally, every American adult should immediately receive $1,000 to help ensure families and workers can meet their short-term obligations and increase spending in the economy. His proposals, that's literally the first thing. I'm not even making this up. This is legit the first thing that you see. And what good would this do? What would this do? Talks about telehealth services. Trump already talked about that. Easing financial burden for students. Trump already talked about that. Loan deferment for recent graduates. Blah, blah, blah. Trump already talked about this. Grants for small businesses. Trump already talked about how he's already met with a Small Business Association, and SBA is actually restructuring their loans and all of that. But the top thing, give $1,000 to every American so they can meet their short-term obligations and increase spending in the economy. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I don't think you should call yourself a Republican anymore. Look, I understand that you think that that's going to help immediately in the short term, but first off, the precedents that sets, and secondly, instead of doing that, let's perhaps cut taxes. Let's cut taxes. Now you could say, but Dana, people aren't going out and purchasing things. They are avoiding crowds and everything else. You are absolutely right. You know what, though? I just realized we have this thing called the internet. And people have used it so much for shopping that it's developed that we have a new economic standard of measuring things like Black Friday after Thanksgiving and retail success, because we are not just measuring purchases in brick and mortar stores anymore. We are actually measuring purchases online. And one of the reasons that brick and mortar stores have actually kind of suffered is because they haven't really suffered so much as they're transitioning to doing everything online. And the things that are still brick and mortar are now specializing in niche markets and more boutique-like offerings and structure. So it's actually become so successful that it could actually work. You can still patronize instead of patroning, as AOC incorrectly said. You can still patronize restaurants. You can still patronize businesses. You can still patronize the retail sector and everything else. Purchase online. I've been fascinated with the accusations from the left that the school districts and governors and mayors choosing to implement certain things like, well, maybe let's do curbside pickup instead of dine-in, or sit 6 feet apart or something like that. They're mad at Trump because Trump didn't make that decision. And if he did, you guys would have called him a tyrant. I've never seen people beg for dictatorship like the left right now with some of this stuff. Yep. Holy cow. That's why you have governors. That's why you have school boards. That's why you have all of these local elections and locally elected positions that are filled every time you have these local elections. You don't need the federal government to take over that supply chain right now, although I will say that this whole thing has made a most excellent case against socialism. I did a radio interview this morning on my book, Grace Canceled, which is out, and you should go to danalash.com to get it. And the press conference Friday, I thought, was I wrote about this on the website. It was a fantastic counter to all of these socialist offerings from Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and all of them. And the way that businesses are stepping up to do more expeditiously what the federal government cannot do, that's the perfect representation of a successful partnership between the private sector and between the federal government. Now, there's certain things that the federal government can do as it relates to the supply chain. In fact, one of the things that I have seen, as it relates to that, is the president looking to incentivize companies that will bring back manufacturing to the United States, and so that we can control the supply chain. That's one of the things that's being discussed. The president's going to be speaking today at 2 p.m. I think that's Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, in which case we will take that. And going to get into some of this. The idea that this has to be federalized, you realize that this is one of the problems, right? You realize that this is one of the reasons, the fact that our government's too big the way it is right now. You realize that big government contributed to this problem, if not, could be considered perhaps one of the causes of it. I mean, look at China, communist China. They had numerous doctors trying to warn people of this back in November, and they were arrested. They had journalists, as I discussed on Friday, that were trying to report on this, and their websites would be taken down. They lied to the world about their numbers, and they hid the genome sequencing from every other country. And in the meantime, they were too preoccupied with getting Taiwan pushed out of the World Health Organization meeting about coronavirus, even though Taiwan is one of the countries most successful at dealing with it. So none of the other countries, China denied every other country that's part of the World Health Organization the ability to learn what Taiwan did that was so effective in terms of containing and containing that virus and keeping the infection rate suppressed. China denied every other country in the world the opportunity to learn about it because they were too butthurt over the fact that they held elections and that they don't consider themselves as part of China, but China does. They've been playing politics with this, and the World Health Organization stupidly goes along with it. Now, that's big government. That's statism. The same sort of statism that Bernie Sanders discusses. Do you see how the hospitals broke down in Italy? Do you see how they've broken down in other countries that have implemented socialism? Okay, their whole political ideologies has already failed repeatedly, and most currently, it's failed this last test. This has been the greatest argument for federalism that we've seen in some time. Joining us right now, one of my favorite people, and he's got the best dang hat in all of Texas, I think. Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayburn. Sheriff, it's an honor to have you as always. Glad to see that you are keeping healthy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
How are you and your deputies? How are you all staying healthy with this? Because you're all a part of police, you're first responders. You're the first point of contact for serious situations. How are you guys approaching, or what are you doing differently in this pandemic era to not just protect yourselves but the community?
Well, the first thing we've done is if our deputies or people are ill is to stay home. Don't come to work. And the second thing that we're doing is that we provided a few materials at the back doors of our jails and in our different divisions that they can, if somebody's at the least bit feeling bad, we will check on them. And if there's a hint of it, we will be sending them home. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that. Law enforcement officers are famous for bad diets and poor exercise, but really our immune systems is pretty good because of what we see and where we're at and where we've done things. So far, so good, but we're being very careful and keeping a close eye on it.
I had to kind of chuckle at one of the headlines I had earlier because Newport, Oregon, their police department hadn't been, I guess, as lucky as yours has. They've been dealing with people calling the emergency line seriously because they ran out of things like toilet paper. And the Newport, Oregon police had to issue a statement saying, stop calling the emergency line just because you're out of toilet paper. That is not an emergency issue. Do you tend to find, and I realize Texas is different, Tarrant County is different. Do you tend to find that maybe it's anxiety that's fueling this, but do you deal with this within your department as well?
We've seen people and we haven't personally been involved in any fights at the grocery store, but we do know that the shelves are cleared out and the toilet paper you can't find, which is a whole another realm of why. But people have panicked and the anxieties are high. And of course, I would say to them, let's be calm. Mm-hmm. Every day is a new day, and this thing is fluid and it's going to be changing and continuous to change. But if we keep our eye on the prize, we will do just fine.
Right. I would imagine that you have received some of the guidelines that's been coming out from the administration and the CDC and what to tell the community about where it concerns anxiety or getting out together in groups. I saw video footage of police in New Orleans just on Saturday going through Bourbon Street, which was packed, telling the crowd to disperse. This is not good for public health. What would you tell people? And I'm actually going to ask this for my own 18-year-old son, who has been very cool about all of this because, obviously you have a lot of college kids that are home. You have a lot of high schoolers that are out of school and everybody's confined in the house. What do you tell that younger demographic who seem to be asymptomatic but it's the older folks that they might come in contact with that we're all trying to, keep from having to go to the hospital? What would you tell the younger people out there about the social distancing and why it's important?
Well, what I would tell them is that probably because they're young and healthy, they're going to survive this. But we need them to serve others now. We need them to take care of their neighbor and to do these common sense things so that they won't be the person that's carrying that bug to a elderly person or somebody that's easily compromised. Is that those kids, it is their moment to shine and on mission to make sure that they're not the carrier of this evil bacteria.
Yeah. And that's a good point as well, because it takes everybody kind of pitching in. I'm glad that the president said that there's not a national federal mandate for a curfew or any kind of lockdown. Have you been seeing people have been pretty good, though, from where you are in Tarrant County? Have people been pretty compliant?
Very compliant. And, my heart breaks for our restaurateurs and places of business that are just being devastated by this economy right now. But I see people being compliant. I'm sitting across from the courthouse right now in downtown Fort Worth, and you could throw rocks and never hit anybody because people are staying home. They're staying away from the areas that people congregate.
Yeah, and it might be good for the first week. How long do you? Well, I mean, I know it's kind of difficult to predict. The president said that it might be a couple of weeks, and then we turn the corner on this, but we still might be dealing with, obviously, cases of this going into July and August. And I kind of wonder, is it the good behavior of the first week because everyone's very concerned about it? And then after the first week settles in and people get cabin fever? I mean, we've never experienced anything like this.
We really haven't. In what my advice to people is give us 2 weeks, and then let's look in the rearview mirror and see where we're at and check on where we're going.
Yeah.
And if we can be disciplined enough to just hang tight right there and really think about this being a mission of being, loving thy neighbor, and loving thy neighbor by staying away from your neighbor, and doing the social distance things and doing the common sense things of washing your hand. If we can do all that, I think in 2 weeks we're going to see a different country and a different time. But I think it's important that we all come together. This is our moment, and we need to come together and defeat this crisis.
Last quick question for you, Sheriff. I've been seeing some lawmakers, Champaign, Illinois, the mayor there, some other lawmakers, when they would declare either a state emergency or even just the mayor saying that we have an emergency here, that some of the ordinances that they have released included prohibition on selling of firearms and ammunition and things like that. We were talking about the legality of something like that. How commonplace is that, to your knowledge and experience, for something that kind of language to be included in some of these ordinances? And what are your thoughts on the legality of it?
Well, I don't think it's legal, number one. And number two is the only place I'm hearing about it is in Illinois. And I think it's an overreach and a reaction where, hey, I can put this amendment on there to show people that, I'm pro-gun control and we're going to keep guns out of these people's hands. And I just think this is the last moment where we are asking people to do things is to interfere with their civil liberties, because, it's encroaching anyway, but we need to have some common sense, and I believe that's outside the realm.
Oh, there you go. Well, we appreciate it, Sheriff Bill Wayburn. Prayers for your safety and health, as well as all the deputies there serving with you and all of our first responders. We so appreciate what y'all do, and hope that you stay safe and healthy and able to keep charging through and get it done. Thank you, Sheriff. So what I'm watching, the president had his press conference. I thought it just finished. I thought he went incredibly well. And there are people mad because, One American News, they're mad about someone at One American News, and it was a newer reporter who asked him, do you consider the phrase Chinese food racist? And I am fit to be tied at the way that some of these people are reacting. And
Chinese flu or food?
Food.
Wow.
No, but they were making a point. The reporter was making a point about why do you consider, how do you feel when they're reporting on all of that and they have access to you and your team and everything else? And, and so now all of the media is upset because One American News was allowed to ask a question that made all of them look like fools, and they're mad about it. I know, I got a lot of headlines here. I have a million things. Let me just share. This is what literally 15 minutes ago, Brian Stelter had tweeted. I feel like, I'm just going to grab I feel like I need to read my book. Hang on. Let me just read for 1 second. Read my book.
Not the intro.
Read my book. Yeah, not the intro. Read my book on grace really quick so I can, I feel like I'm in a better position. So Brian Stelter tweeted, and by the way, I have no ties to One American News. I know like one person there. He tweeted, the tiny cable channel One American News Network can do whatever it wants. What it chose to do today is shameful. I responded, dude, stop it. This is It's really ridiculous. You allowed people on your program to refer to me as somebody who owns Congress and loves murder kids. So this posturing is over the top, and it is. You people have some of these networks have been running communist Chinese propaganda. Communist Chinese propaganda as content. In fact, I just saw a clip, I retweeted it a little bit, actually about maybe 20 minutes ago, of programming literally from communist China that were it not for the language barrier, I would think, oh, this is MSNBC. This is certain channels on CNN. How in the world is whatever reporter that was from One American News, my only critique was that it took her 5,000 years to ask a question. Be fast asking your questions. Otherwise, that was the only critique I had. So why is it that they're all freaking out because she asked that question, and yet you can have Yamish and everybody else saying, well, is the Chinese virus racist? Is it racist to ask about the Chinese virus? Is it racist? Is it... Mr. President, is it racist asking about the Chinese virus? Mr. President, is it racist? Is it racist? I mean, seriously, every single day, that's all I hear. You hell, at this point, you could have people falling down and dying in the streets with face masks on, and then you would hear, oh, Mr. President, is it racist to call it Chinese flu? That's all you would hear. And I wanted to bring in Dr. Michael Jelinek, who is a specialist with infectious diseases. And this is obviously his wheelhouse. And I wanted to bring him because I know enough to self-medicate for allergies and the common cold. This is obviously not even anywhere remotely near my wheelhouse or on the planet of where my wheelhouse is located. So we appreciate Dr. Jelinek's time with us this afternoon. Doctor, thank you.
You're welcome.
So this, the first thing that I want to make clear to everyone, because there's so many different kinds of coronaviruses out there, and as I understand it, one of the reasons why we are starting at square one with this particularly is because it is mutated, and also we're unfamiliar with its behavior, with the period of contagiousness, and there's even been discussion on how easily it is spread down to how long it would even last on surfaces. Is that some of the hurdle that doctors like yourself and researchers are facing when trying to figure out the best way to treat this and acquire and produce a vaccine?
Yes, that's very important because this virus is so new to the medical community that no one really has a handle on it yet. So getting effective treatment, prevention, and figuring out how well it spreads, we've been way behind because we didn't get proper information out of China until well after the epidemic there had started and subsequently became a pandemic. Mm-hmm. So when you listen to Senator Sass has been one who's been very much on top of this, and he's said that we haven't gotten proper information out of China, and we don't even know whether the information that we do get is accurate. And the same could be said for other countries, but not knowing the true epidemiology, it's hard to figure out how to address the community needs and how to effectively treat this. So there are lots and lots of small research groups that are looking into how this can be best addressed. They're trying many different antiviral medicines and adjuvant medicines to try and see how they can control this.
Right.
And the drugs that you mentioned, hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil, is one of the lead ones, and azithromycin or Zithromax is another. But there are many others that scientists are looking at.
Well, that's good that they are that they've achieved some success with this. They said the 20 cases that they treated showed a significant reduction of viral carriage using those two things, the hydroxychloroquine and then the azithromycin, because this is stuff that we already have on our shelves. Is that I would imagine as well with the vaccine, because I keep hearing that the vaccine could take anywhere from goodness, 12 months, 14 months, I think maybe perhaps worst case scenario, 18 months. Is something like this, do you think that maybe would be helpful in the short term until a vaccine is fully available for the public? Is that what they're approaching and researching with us?
That seems to be the most succinct approach to this, which is try and treat affected patients and limit the spread, and then focus as they are focusing. They're already trying the vaccine in human volunteers to prevent the transmission of the disease. So progress is being made, and it's at a phenomenally rapid rate. This is incredible how much research is being done and how rapidly things are being tested to see if they will work. It's experimentation.
Yes, I read that they didn't. Normally, there's some sort of animal testing involved usually with these in creating these vaccines. And the one that they had administered the other day, I read that was the first person, that was the first living thing that was being tested with this. So it's incredibly brave, but I also think it really underscores the urgency.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. One of the other things that I had been looking at to explain how contagious this is compared to, because, obviously the flu can be very dangerous and we've had other epidemics before, but I wanted to ask you as to your opinion on the level of contagiousness with this. There was one study that I had cited yesterday, and this was just researchers. These were only 9 patients that they had looked at thus far. So I would imagine, it's a very small sample in the grand scheme of things. But they said with the 9 individuals, the ones who those who were they said that the viral shedding was something like 1,000 times more than what you would see shed from infected individuals that had SARS, and they think that that's probably. That's really explaining the rapid spread of this virus. Is that, that seems, because we all heard SARS was one of the most contagious things ever. I've never heard anything like this. I'd like your thoughts on it.
Well, SARS, it was another coronavirus, and it did originate in China as well. Coincidence? Who knows?
Right.
But the amount of viral shedding that has been seen with this it's pretty impressive, and when you have that amount of viral shedding, it's always easier to infect other individuals around the index case, which is the first case that
right, the patient
sees.
0. Yeah. Wow.
So it appears to be a rapidly multiplying virus which has the ability to co-infect other individuals because of the volume of shedding that the virus has, meaning that the patients release virus, and even asymptomatic patients release quite a bit of virus.
Is this why not to interrupt you, but is this why they're also still testing positive even after it seems as though their fevers are gone and they are no longer infectious, but they still test positive, not so much for being contagious, but just as still kind of having, I guess, a residual level of it?
They may have ineffective virus, and that's the current working theory, that someone who's already well and recovering from the viral infection, who is still testing positive, the theory is that those viral particles that they're still testing positive for are no longer effective at infecting other individuals. But the jury's out on that. No one knows, but that's one working theory.
We're speaking with Dr. Michael Jelinek, who is a specialist with infectious diseases in the great Republic of Texas. And Doctor, I wanted to one last question that I wanted to ask you in terms of vaccines and treatments for this, as you had just previously mentioned, it is a remarkable speed at which the medical and scientific community is traveling right now in achieving something like this. How long realistically, in your expert opinion, and just from everything that you have dealt with in your career, what realistic expectation should people have in terms of when they can hear news about maybe even more widespread, safer testing of vaccinations, or when it would be publicly available? How long do you think that would take?
I can only speculate, and I would imagine it's going to be at least another month or two before we get very widespread testing in this country, which would give people reassurance. But
Yeah,
because I believe that most individuals, about 80% of people who get infected with this, have little to no symptoms.
and they wouldn't
And
even
then
know.
15%. Correct. And these are the people that spread it to others. And this is why it's so important to restrict things like
Yes.
spring break.
It's hard for everybody for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, ruin your party, right?
Exactly. You know, and one last quick thing, Dr. Jelinek, and again, we're so grateful for your time this afternoon. This made me think of something that I had heard being discussed from some others, and then I think even Dr. Fauci had addressed this, touched upon it, not really addressed it in depth, although I imagine that discussion is coming. Is it if with everyone self-isolating and containing or flattening the curve, as the phrase is, and making sure that the infection doesn't spike and overwhelm our health system, wouldn't this be a problem still until the vaccines are available? Because even after the infection rate goes down, is there a real concern that if the self-isolation period is over and say, in 15 days everyone's able to go out, do we need to fear that because we don't have widely available vaccinations out there yet, that this could actually spike again and we might be looking at doing this again?
Well, one thing that may be that scientists are relying upon is herd immunity, meaning that even some of those people who are isolated and self-isolated or restricted to family maybe don't have any symptoms, maybe they were infected, but they're going to produce antibodies, so they're no longer going to be able to spread this to others. So this is how epidemics die down. The herd becomes immune, and it's herd immunity is very important. This is why when we have these isolated outbreaks of measles, it's because people haven't been vaccinated, and it's that the people that are the non-vaccinated population are relying, so to speak, on the herd to protect them against these infectious agents. But I believe that once we get a certain level of herd immunity, this will all die down and it will go away, and it will be a very bad memory, but it will be going away like all epidemics and pandemics do.
Good job, Celia Vega, going to work for your Chinese masters. Good job. Man, give me grace right now to deal with this kind of stuff. Because this is, by the way, buy my book, Grace Canceled, because we all need it at this point. We all need it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's that kind of question, by the way, for her to ask that, and that's not a serious question from a serious person. What amazes me is that you have China that's kicking out all American journalists. You have China that maliciously and purposefully caused a pandemic by arresting the doctors that were trying to get the warning out, by also arresting journalists trying to report about it, lying about the data, refusing to share critical data, and bullying the World Health Organization to exclude Taiwan from an international meeting with every other country on the Wuhan coronavirus. And this chick, after this question has been asked twice already, this brainiac has the audacity to just repeat the same damn question that two other reporters before her asked. She's a bad journalist. Celia Vega, you're a bad journalist. You don't do your job well. There are other people who are more academically and intellectually motivated to do your job and are more qualified. This is not a serious gatherer of news. This is a person who thinks that repeating Chinese propaganda is the same thing as doing her due diligence and research on a story. I have nothing kind to say to her right now. And if this were 5 years ago, I would be dragging her by her hair verbally. And it's taking everything I have right now to not. I find that not helpful. As a viewer, I find her a burden. I find this sort of reporting, this propaganda spreading to be a burden. Anyone who is in this to fillet their ego, and anyone who is in this to push propaganda because they are so bitterly partisan that they are willing to repeat communist propaganda, you should be ashamed of yourself and publicly ridiculed. Because now it's a national security issue. And good on Trump for answering the same question again that Celia Vega was 3 times late to the game for. I mean, good job. How embarrassing is that for you as a journalist to ask the same question that 2 other people asked? And this soundbite, that the answer that he gave already went viral as a soundbite. Now it's going viral as a soundbite because she looks ridiculous. It's going viral as a soundbite because it's embarrassing for her. I mean, and no self-awareness at all whatsoever. I mean, how ridiculous is this? What in the hell is wrong with some of you people? You want to know why we sit here and we mock and ridicule, and why I have personally gone after the press for over 10 years? Because of stuff like this. You know, we're all trying to get information, and we're all trying to be cool, and we're all trying to just figure out what's going on, and you have this kind of garbage? Isn't this racist? What do you aides back there think? Well, they probably think that you're a moron. I'm just going to go out on a limb here because every other reporter there is asking questions, the answers to which I want to hear. Every other reporter there was asking good, pertinent questions. They were asking, what about the tests? What about infrastructure? What about ABC? I mean, there were so many questions, and I was taking notes on it. And then this chick, Mr. President, do you think that it's racist to call it the Chinese coronavirus? Wow, did you just read that on Twitter like last night before you decided to just like really mull over that and use that as your question? The reason I haven't moved on from this is because the time that I have spent on this is unequal to how angry that made me. That's not helping the American public. That's a freak show. That's not a free press in action. That chick. That's a freak show. It doesn't help anybody at all. And all the other reporters, and I made mention of this earlier today on Twitter, all of the reporters out there who have to work 2 and 3 times as hard, you know, the good ones that are actually bringing you the information that you need to know, they have to work 2 and 3 times as hard to just compensate for this kind of garbage. If I were her boss, and if that was a Democrat president, and that was a conservative reporter, I would have fired her. I would have called her up while she was there, and I would have fired her on the spot. I would have texted her and told her to come and clean out your damn desk. Ridiculous. She's angrier about that than she is about the fact that a communist country who has declared a propaganda war on the United States in time of a pandemic that they maliciously and purposefully caused is doing everything possible to disassociate themselves from the culpability, including politicizing and berating and bending to their will the World Health Organization at the expense of thousands of lives. And her problem is correctly noting where this originated. I will say this every single day out of spite. The more you push back against it, the more I'm going to say it. I tend to prefer Wuhan because that's where the hotspot is and that's where it originated. China caused this. But don't sit here and play semantics with this BS right now. You're going to get me in trouble with the FCC. Don't. Joining us right now Congressman Chip Roy from the great state of Texas, who has been going through this in D.C. Congressman, we're grateful to have you, and happy that you're staying safe and healthy. Give us the latest on this, because I know that there were a lot of concerns about, what was going to be included in this package coming up from the House. I know Mitch McConnell was saying yesterday that there are a number of Republican senators that had some concerns because there were some things that Nancy Pelosi and others were trying to slip in here that had absolutely nothing to do with response to this pandemic.
Well, Dana, first of all, thank you. Glad it sounds like you're healthy and doing well. Obviously, the first thing we should be doing is praying to make sure that, those that are potentially suffering are well, and praying for their safety and well-being, and praying for our nation. And I know you agree with that. And let's also keep in mind that perspective here matters. We need to remember that this nation has overcome, Nazism. We put a man on the moon. We, rebuilt Southern Manhattan. We cured polio. And I go down a laundry list of things. We're going to be fine, and we're going to overcome this, but we're going to have to work together to do it. At the end of the day, right now, my primary objective is how do we get on top of healthcare to make sure everybody's, taken care of, and that we don't let the virus spread too rapidly, flatten the curve, as people say. And then secondly, how do we get our economy cranking back up again so that we're not causing more harm through a prolonged recession or even depression because we've gone so far in shutting down commerce. So when I look at what the Democrats proposed last week, there were pieces of it that were fine. Trying to fix and expand unemployment insurance so that people can be cared for, trying to fix and deal with some of the SNAP and food stamp issues. But ultimately, there were mandates in the bill that would have been highly destructive to small businesses, and there were carve-outs for big businesses. And it was being rushed through without us having the ability to debate and vote on it. So I voted no and tried to hold on to it and delay it a little bit so we could actually debate it. We ended up having a little debate, improved the bill a little, got some relief for some of those small businesses, but not enough. It got over to the Senate, and now Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, and some others are trying to solve the problem by improving the bill. Bottom line is we need to put capital into the hands of small businesses so they can keep their businesses afloat. Right now, government, the power of government, both rhetorically and actually, is being used to tell people to basically shut their businesses down. That's a problem, right? That's close to a regulatory taking. It may be the right response in the face of a health crisis, but people's lives are attached to it.
Right.
So I, like you, I'm a fiscal conservative, a limited government conservative, but I am not troubled by some of the conversations we're having right now about expanding unemployment insurance, figuring out COBRA and patchwork to get people to keep their health care, and even some direct cash payments, particularly if they're means tested, to ensure that we're doing what we need to do to keep workers able to work, small businesses functioning. What we don't need are massive bailouts for Wall Street while ignoring small businesses and workers. I'm hopeful the Senate will improve that legislation, but we need to all keep working together, all to get through this briefly and then get around the bend and get our economy going and do what Americans do best to survive and beat this. Yeah,
and that's going to be the $1 million question, because I was listening to some of what Steve Mnuchin was saying yesterday, and I realized that he was kind of giving a sort of Overton window kind of approach, but saying, look, you could see unemployment spike, maybe even go up to 20%. It's just you're gonna have this happen. And one of the proposals that has been discussed often is the $1,000 a month to individuals as some relief, which I asked people on social media yesterday to explain to me why they think this would be better than the approaches that I'm kind of that I think that we should as limited government fiscal conservatives look at. I would sit here and go to even to the extreme, like, let's just not have income tax, and let's have, I realize that we have some extensions now, but why not just have a grace period? Government's got enough money. Why we could cut all this needless spending. We could cut all these other regulations and payroll tax and et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that? Because that, I think, has been, it's not that conservatives are, and this, conservatives or even kind of libertarians or independents are opposed to measures in a time of a pandemic, because we've never been through anything like this, and at some point it does become a national security concern. But how far do you think is too far?
It's a good question, and I don't pretend to know the answer for sure. What I think is most important is that whatever steps we take, we do it through the lens of getting through it rapidly and getting around the bend. And so I keep saying that because it's really important. We can't shut down for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months and try to go through until, okay, there's no more virus, we have a vaccine. We can't do that. We have got to get our economy functioning again because we need people to have jobs, food on their tables, being able to pay their bills, being able to go and get medicine and go get health care. We need all of our economy functioning. We can't just leave pieces of it functioning.
Right.
We need to right now flatten the curve, take the steps necessary to stop the spike, get our healthcare system squared away. I do believe that a mix of cash payments to some limited amount, within some reason, and unemployment insurance and ways that we can help bridge the gap for workers for some period of weeks, right? Whatever that is, I do believe that's critically important. Again, Dana, keep in mind the power of government is being used here, rightly or wrongly, to say we can't be out at restaurants. We can't be out in big groups. We can't be flying and going staying in hotels, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, if that's the right call for public health, history will judge that. Then right now we have something close to a government taking. We're taking away people's liberty to make money. So government has a role here. I believe this is a limited government constitutional conservative, a role here to step in and try to bridge the gap, give people the ability to get from point A to point B. I don't know what that looks like in terms of how big is the cash payment, how often, how much do we do it through unemployment insurance, what do we do on those fronts, but we need to do it. We need to do it quickly, but the most important thing is getting capital to small businesses to keep them afloat so people have jobs. Allow entrepreneurs and innovation to take over. There's a company here that says something that I've read about where they'll go into a local restaurant and basically create like a Sonic where you drive up, punch in what you want to order from that restaurant, and they can bring it out to your window. That's
awesome.
Great. More of that. More charity. More helping your neighbors. Keep seniors protected. Do what you can to help the neighbor down the street. Go down and buy gift cards from local restaurants. Do what you can to keep them afloat. Double tip, triple tip. And then we get busy doing what we should do, but we got to fix the healthcare situation. We got to have a whole nother call about China and disentangling ourselves from China and the supply chain over there. I sent a letter to the Democrats on Oversight Committee with all my colleagues on the Republican side, and it was well received, by the way, by my Democrat colleagues, to have a hearing and oversight as soon as possible about how much our supply chain and healthcare is too entangled with China.
Right.
We've got to do something about that, but that's a whole nother call.
And that should be, and that's a priority too, to make sure that we control that supply chain. I was looking at some of this because I know that some people are talking about the R word, recession, and some others have even suggested that could this lead to a Great Depression, which I think might be an exaggeration. But I mean, I remember previously, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the government in times of national emergencies, I know that it happened under Bush, and I think it happened under Obama as well, that they'd sent something like this $1,000 was attempted previously, and it really didn't have that much of an impact in terms of getting the economy back on track. Do you think that well, go ahead and address that, and then I was going to ask you if you think we're actually sliding towards a recession.
Well, look, I think we're going to definitely have a massive slowdown. There's no way we cannot when we've actually just stopped the wheels of commerce in multiple areas. I mean, airlines are basically, empty. Cruise ships are empty. Hotels are empty. Restaurants are being told not to operate. We're going to have a massive slowdown. Again, our goal is to get through it quickly and then get around the bend and get going again. The $1,000 issue, I think some of my conservative friends are getting a little mixed up about calling this a stimulus.
Yes.
But this isn't about stimulus. Because the $1,000 would fail to be a true stimulus, to be honest with you. But what it will do is bridge the gap for workers who are left stranded because service workers can't work and go get go wait tables, right? I mean, we're telling people you can't go to a restaurant. The waitress and the waiter is going, well, now what do I do? They literally don't have a job. And so we can go down to unemployment, fine, and we should do that. But we can provide some relief with direct cash payments. It's very different. It's not about stimulus as much as floating everybody to get through it. Again, my call and my advice to the White House is get around as soon as we possibly can to some sort of date certain in which we're going to get around the bend and tell people, look, wash your hands and get back in the ballgame. At some point, that's what we're going to have to do. I don't know whether that's April 1st, 15th, May 1st, July 1st. But at some point, sooner rather than later, we're going to have to crank everything back up again and make sure we've got our healthcare system able to deal with it.
Yeah.
We can't shut our economy down in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So we just got to get through it and bridge it. And once we do, we'll come out of it great if we do all the things we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's some steps that we can take when we're on the other side of it. And China's already on the other side of it. South Korea is already on the other side of it. And Italy's getting there. They're getting there. They're coming out of the middle of it right now as we are about to slide right into it. So there's definite steps that we can take to really mitigate really, I think, some of the worst economic outcomes. One last thing before I let you go, and this has been kind of a fight on the side of the big Wuhan coronavirus fight, is what to call it. And everybody has been, I personally think, I've written about this. I think, this is communist China. They maliciously and purposefully spread this when they were arresting doctors that were saving lives, shutting down labs, deleting reporting that were trying to warn the public, withholding critical data, using the World Health Organization, bullying them to exclude countries like Taiwan for political reasons. At what point, because I know right now we got to focus on making sure the country gets through this. But I'm thinking we have to get more aggressive than the United States has ever been with China when this is done. What is your thought?
Well, I agree completely. I mean, I don't know all the facts yet. None of us really do about what's going on. I know this. When China's kicking out our reporters, something's going on. And look, I'm no fan of the media, and neither are you as a general matter in terms of how they do things in the United States, and they tend to have leftist progressive tendencies. But dadgummit, the First Amendment is critical to a functioning democracy and getting the truth. And China's trying to hide this stuff. And so we've got to get much more aggressive with China. Look, they've been our enemy for a long time. They've been targeting us on intellectual property. They've been engaging in espionage, stealing our secrets, sticking it to our businesses, been playing hardball. Look, the president was right, by the way, to come in and start trying to play a little hardball with China with trade. And don't think for a minute they don't know that. And the way they've handled all this from the beginning, whether or not they cooked it up and created this virus or whether or not the virus occurred and they hid it, or all of the above. China has been not upfront in dealing with this. They are not our friend. We need to remember that in whatever we do in creating policies. And going forward, we need to make sure our supply chain and healthcare and other critical national security areas is free from being controlled by an entity like China, which is our enemy and not our friend.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely on that. You're going to be busy, Congressman. You're going to be so busy coming up. I hope that you travel safe and that you stay healthy.
Yeah, you too. God bless. Happy to come on anytime.
Of
Just
course.
stay well. We live in the greatest state in the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
We'll all fight and get through this. And God bless you and all your listeners.
Joining me right now, Charlie Kirk, founder of a really awesome organization, Turning Point USA, that engages and flips the switch of all of these collegiate people all across the country, gets them engaged, and he's got a new book out, The MAGA Doctrine. I just like the book cover because Trump's hugging a flag, and I like that book cover. I remember that moment too. His brand new book, which is out now, and of course, he's been following all of this and commenting on it. Charlie, always good to have you. Congrats on the book. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here, Dana. Thanks so much.
Of course. I know you've been watching this Chinese propaganda war as well. I have to get your thoughts on the number of journalists. Now, not all, but there's a significant number of individuals that are trading on their credibility, and they are ignoring all of these actual things that China has done that contribute directly to the spread of this pandemic and accusing the United States of doing it. And they're going after the administration and ignoring these, actual serious offenses. What is your take on all of this?
Yeah, I've been calling it the Chinese virus for a couple of weeks now. And when I came right out of the gate and said that, I was under huge backlash from the kind of left-wing intelligentsia. But, China lied about this. China did not handle this correctly in their own country. They basically have now infected the entire world, and they need to be held accountable and held responsible. And I've said for a while, China's our greatest enemy. They're not our friend. They're not our ally. The fact we still trade with them as much as we do needs to be completely and totally reconsidered. We have sanctions against Iran. We have sanctions against Russia, but we just treat China as if they're this wonderful friend of ours. Mm-hmm. They lie as a feature of their society. And look, we as conservatives, we need to be honest with ourselves that over the last 20, 30 years, we, under the idea of free market absolutism, and I'm a Milton Friedman capitalist free market guy, we just turned a blind eye against China. Yeah. But sometimes national security outweighs any sort of market forces. And now our health security, our economic security have all been put into jeopardy because of our connection to the Chinese Communist Party. And these are unethical, sinister individuals that have been running the tyrannical Chinese Communist Party for some time. And one final point on this, I was watching the press briefing. I was very proud of the president for how he was standing up against that ridiculous left-wing journalist that said, well, don't you think this is racist?
Oh,
I thought to myself, my goodness, if this is not an example of how the left cares more about trying to find their phantom ghost of racism than saving lives in the midst of the pandemic, is that not more just more evidence of that's what the left actually cares about more than anything else, trying to make Trump look insensitive than actually trying to save lives? And that was, I was reprehensible.
A very and a great point as well, and it makes me think of a number of my friend Buck Sexton also made a great point where he said there's a strong correlation right now between journalists who falsely claimed for 3 years that Trump was quote unquote doing Putin's bidding and those who are now doing Xi Jinping's bidding by spreading this Wuhan coronavirus propaganda on behalf of Beijing. I mean, irony must be dead.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, look, this intelligentsia journalist class, they seem so irritated that Donald Trump is now telling the truth about the origins of the virus. But let's be honest with ourselves. Ebola, West Nile, Spanish flu, these are all regions, rivers, or portions of the world. We always name
There's a St. Louis virus for crying out loud. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. And for reason, because sometimes it can be instructive of where the virus came from.
Right.
And it also just goes to the point of evidence that this is nothing new. It's not as if we just decided to call it that because it just happened to be China.
Right.
However, you even made a better point that it's actually unfair to call some of these other viruses by their region because China's actually contributed more to the spread of the virus than any other virus in the last 100 years.
Right.
It wasn't like when the Spanish flu was spread, there was, a Spanish ruling class that tried to cover it up. It was pretty well known that it was happening, and this is different. China could have done something very simple. When they had 100 cases, when they had 1,000 cases, they're not stupid. They're sinister, but they're not stupid. They know how infectious diseases work. Yeah. They could have said, hey, we got a pandemic happening in our own country. We're closing off the borders. You guys should too. We're going to close down factories. Can you help us? And guess what? The world would have said, oh, my gosh, we don't want that in our country. Instead, they lied about it. This is early as November. This was spreading. And that means that, by the way, this has been in our country for a lot longer than we realized.
Oh, yes.
And look, this is going to be I don't know where this is going to end up. I have no idea where this is going to land, but I could tell you that the Chinese could have blunted this. They could have stunted it. And instead, we are in the midst of something that there is no playbook for.
Absolutely.
This is something that is now of the economic carnage that can only be compared to the 2008 financial crisis or 9/11.
Yeah, and we are going to be dealing with the fallout of it for some time. But thankfully, I'm happy that we have somebody in the White House that understands economics. You discuss your new book, and I want to make sure I touch on this as well. Your new book, The MAGA Doctrine, and like I said, I really like the book cover. The only ideas that will win the future. I remember when Trump first really started seriously doing the push for the presidential run, and this was maybe back in 2013. And he talked a lot about China at the time. And it seemed to, particularly to the left, and then there were certain aspects of the GOP that did not necessarily take it as seriously as I think it needed to be taken. And I'm wondering, because I know that you get into all of this in the book, these ideas that really, I mean, it's one of the reasons why it was the party was able to build a big tent, but because he was focusing on policies and trade and manufacturing and economics. But do you think that history is going to judge Trump to be astute on this? Because I remember when he suspended just in the beginning of January, when he was talking about suspending flights to China, he was railed on by the press as a racist. And now everyone's finally crediting that action for saving thousands of American lives. And when he's been talking about trade and manufacturing with China for several years now, are we at the point now where people are going to take this seriously? Is history going to judge him and being correct? And will we finally get to the point where we can stop relying on the cheap, instant gratification market from China?
Look, so many great points there, Dana. Yes, I wrote this book because I felt that someone needed to articulate the philosophical defense of the Trump presidency. And now with this virus, whether we like it or not, this virus will determine his presidency and decide his presidency. He's a phenomenal leader. He's going to get through this, and he's going to be known as someone who killed the invisible killer. And that's and by the way, that's going to be something that I don't think any other president in recent memory could have done this. And this only shows his two big issues: reliance on China and anti-globalism, and immigration are now playing out right now. And I think only reinforces his original instincts and what he's tried to do to actually make America sovereign and to challenge some of our endless and limitless immigration policies, and also challenge China. And so this is a win for him in that sense. But look, as far as his legacy goes, we are now at a point, and I didn't think we would get here, to be honest with you. When we were at CPAC a couple weeks ago, I thought this thing would have normalized, flattened the curve. We're 30% down on the Dow. I mean, people are seeing their life savings disappear. Mm-hmm. President Trump rebuilt this economy once. He'll rebuild it again, and he have to, and he will. He'll be the only president in American history to will have rebuilt the American economy twice, and he'll do it. And that's the type of leader that he is. And I want every American to know, to have the optimism that's what's going to have to happen. Unemployment's going to go up. We're going to go into a recession. There's no beating around the bush. And guess what? He's going to go again, and he'll be able to say, I got us the lowest ever black unemployment rate twice. And that's going to be a great thing for him to say. This is out of his control. He tried to shut down the borders. He's tried to be skeptical of China. The American people are going to give him a lot of breathing room. And I think the more that he goes to these press conferences and he tells the truth, the better. And by the way, the amount of stress that he's under, I mean, my goodness, there's no playbook for this. Mm-mm. No playbook. I mean, in a traditional ground war, there's a playbook. You've got generals that have been around for 150, 150 years
Sun
of
Tzu it,
conventional warfare. Yeah, and you kind of have an expectation what's going to happen. There's no playbook here. You have economic carnage happening simultaneously with people dying, people getting infected. He's going to be able, in my opinion, to tell a story that he brought together the entire country and the United States government and fought something that the country has never seen before successfully. And I think that is the MAGA doctrine. I think your intro is spot on that.
One last quick question for you. And one of the reasons why I think it's important for what you have done in articulating the philosophical basis of his politics and really the era that we are in as it relates to republicanism. What happens in 2020? I want to get through this pandemic, and I feel confident about 2020. But 2024 is where my concern is, because he is such. He's really refined the GOP. How you can't replicate it. So what becomes? How does that philosophy influence the people who are coming up in 2024? And what does that leadership look like? What does the GOP look like then?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's less about like who's going to be the nominee. I get that question a lot. Is it going to be this person or that person? You can fill in the blanks.
Right,
I don't want to, conjecture. It's less about that, more important of what the base, the people listening to this wonderful program, are going to demand. We have to demand strict immigration. We have to demand renegotiated deals with China. We have to demand a challenging the ruling class consensus. We have to demand to be a party of people that shower before work and shower after work, a working class, middle class party. That's what we have to demand. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I think President Trump is going to chart a new direction for the Republican Party for the better. Let the Democrats be the party of the ruling class snobbish elites on the coast. I want to represent what you called in your terrific book, by the way, Flyover Nation. You can't govern a country that you don't know about. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it was terrific book. And that articulates the MAGA doctrine. That was almost like it could have almost been a precursor. You could have wrote my intro, if you will, because that talks about how President Trump has brought dignity back to forgotten America. Let the Democrats rule Malibu, Manhattan, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. That's fine. I mean, you're president for all Americans, but politically, let them dominate there. What about the industrial base to our country?
Right.
What about our policemen, our firefighters, the union workers? That's the part of the country that I think has made this country the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. President Trump knew this instinctively. President Trump has brought a voice back to forgotten America, and I believe the more the Republican Party learns from this, the better, and that we will be successful in the future.
Well, this book, I think that even if someone out there is an independent or even a Democrat, I think to really understand republicanism now and this philosophy, I think you need to read the book, The MAGA Doctrine, the only ideas that will win the future. I also think, and Charlie, I think that this is this book I think really puts to words it's got kind of like a blueprint also for the big tent that Republicans always said that they wanted but never were able to achieve before. Charlie Kirk, he's getting slammed by the press for this because and there were even a couple of conservatives that were like, that was too hardcore. No, I actually don't think it was. I disagree that it was too hardcore. And here's why I disagree that it was too hardcore. At some point, the indulgence of this BS has got to stop, people. And so many people for so long have told themselves that that it is manners to continue to indulge this, that you are being polite by continuing to indulge this, that you are being civil by continuing to indulge this, when actually what you're really doing is perpetuating incivility by continuing to indulge this. And by this, I'm talking about this partisan, accusatory, hostile, ridiculous behavior from partisan members of the press. And for him to ask a question, they're terrified. Shouldn't they be? What the hell kind of question is that? What is the purpose of this question? Are you trying to get someone in government to give a soundbite that, yes, everyone should be terrified, we're all going to die? I mean, honestly, is that not the logical conclusion to that line of questioning?
And you know how absurd it is that you just said that? Because this is in the context of him asking the question, do you think you're giving Americans a false sense of security and hope? Like, you have to understand that this is how the media set him up. They're like,
It is a stupid question on its face.
It is.
Do you think are you lying to the American people about their safety? That's what he's asking.
Yeah.
The hell kind of question is that? That's not a question that is designed to get an actual serious discussion answer. That is a question that is designed to get it on the record as somebody, look, he asked if he was giving people a false impression. So the headline could be, Trump has asked whether or not he's giving Americans a false sense of safety, and he dodges the question, or he blah, blah. That's the headline they were going for. That's exactly what they wanted. That's why this is BS. This is coming from someone who loves the idea of panic. Do you remember what I said? And I wrote this in my book. Do you remember when I said that there are certain people, and I was very careful about my remarks, by the way. When you are on air 3 hours a day, every single day, you have to have people lie about what you say because that's the only way that they can do it, because you're better than they are at crafting messaging. When I heard him ask that question, I knew what the headline was going to be. And I'm glad that Trump reacted the way that he did to it. Because first off, it called attention to this guy's lack of professionalism. That is not a question of a good reporter. That is not a question of a competent reporter. That is a question of that's polemics. That's what that is. That's not journalism. There was no information that could be garnered because that wasn't a serious question. And so for all the people who are bemoaning how mean he was to the press, no matter how what Trump did right there was probably the angriest I've ever seen him be towards a member of the press. And it still doesn't even come close to how Barack Obama treated the press. And Eric Holder getting in the face of reporters when they were asking about Fast and Furious, finger waving, literally right up in their faces, or wiretapping certain reporters at the AP, or whether it's James Rosen or whomever. Doesn't even come close. So put your damn smelling salts down. It's ridiculous. I don't give a crap about your political leanings. Some of these reporters think that they are more important than anything that they are going to ever report on. And they don't understand that their job and what they're doing is way bigger than they ever will be. It is a sacred institution, because when you are reporting, let me put it to you this way. When 9/11 happened and the country was traumatized, and we wanted up-to-date information, you needed to be able to trust the people that were telling you things. When you turn on a television, that person is essentially in your home. And it has always been perceived that way. Back during even with radio before television, 50s, 60s, 70s. You look to these people because they are consistent in how they approach a story, regardless of what their own personal feelings are. And the really good reporters, the really good ones, and I know that everyone has a political bent, but the difference between a good reporter and a bad reporter is the good reporter realizes that the institution in which they are in is more important than their personal views, right or wrong. They know that what they are doing is incredibly important. They are giving people information. And during 9/11, a lot of that kind of fell by the wayside, at least in the initial week. A lot of the editorialism and partisanship fell to the initial wayside because it was important that people get information. And here we're in a global pandemic. We have never, as a world, gone through anything like this together. It has upended lives, and it is very different. And as people are losing their businesses, and they are losing their livelihoods, and they don't know what's going to happen, and we are in uncharted waters, people are looking to the press to give them undiluted information that is free from the stain of partisan politics. It is free from any filter of personal belief or personal politics. It is just the straight news. And there are many people that are in this profession that are failing to do this. They are failing the people, not just their institution, which they are also failing, but they are failing the people. And that's what makes me so angry, because I know how important a free press is. You cannot have a free republic without a free press, and you cannot have a free press through partisanship and people who do not understand the importance and significance of their job. And a free people have every right to criticize a free press when they go too far in that. And you can't have a free press without a free people. I do believe that the federal government is being very, very careful to not call for like full on, we're going to have martial law and all this stuff. All of these calls in terms of shutting things down, curfews, that's been locality by locality. And like I said, this is not going to just be 14 days. I think it's going to be longer, but then at what point is too much? Because I already feel that some of these localities are really pushing the line constitutionally, really pushing the line. I understand that there are certain things that change during a time of pandemic. And I also understand that the sheltering in place and some of the curfew stuff, there's certain things that can be done constitutionally, but with a ton of restrictions. And there was a really good piece on this. And actually, it was one of the things that Andrew Napolitano had been discussing about civil liberties and the virus and all of this stuff. And it's not, there's no easy answer to it. I think that to be good stewards and to thwart the government from exploiting it, there are certain things that we want to voluntarily do as much as possible so that we don't give government a reason to do things. Because, like I said, I think that if we would go into a longer lockdown than 14 days and you start having the National Guard come out and you start doing that, I'm not saying that that is even being promoted. In fact, the administration has been very, very, Mike Pence was just saying it this morning. I listened to him saying it live, and he in no uncertain terms said that's not happening. It has been as Kay noted, it's been a very private sector approach. If it went beyond that, we would have major issues, I think, constitutionally. In terms of limiting assembly, our church voluntarily went to a digital service. And I think it's important to remind people, particularly as it relates to the church, your church is not a building. Your church is not a property. Your church is the people. And it is where you assemble. And even if you are by yourself and you are engaging in your worship, you're a church. I really want to make that clear to people. And when you remember in the early days of Christianity, when it was, whether it was Christ standing on the mount or wherever, the church was where the people were worshiping. Do not get blinded by the real point and the real message of faith and of God meeting you where you are, because you're focusing on where you can, if you can meet at a building or not. So voluntarily, our church chose to do digital service. That does not mean people are not praying. It does not mean people are not doing whatever they can to either study or have their devotionals. There are people who are doing their small groups through Zoom calls and that. And that does not mean that you are seeking God any less or that God is any less active. Don't let the devil fool you. So I think that's an important point that people should not miss with that. And I know it's weird because the fellowship is a huge part of it. And it's encouraged, which is why I think you need to be digitally reaching out. This is where, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is where actually social media, Facebook, live streaming, things like that, Instagram, that can actually be used for good. And I also think that this is a time where we're meant to be still right now, and we are meant to look inward, and we're meant to connect with our families. And I don't miss that either. Don't miss that. I wish I had all the answers. I don't. But I'm okay with not having all the answers, honestly, because I'm wound up on everything else, but when it hits the fan, I'm really laid back about it.